In a plot twist so laughably desperate that even a bad soap opera wouldn't attempt it, General Anselm Sanyatwe walked into President Emerson Mnangagwa's ministerial performance contract signing event, and the public naturally assumed he was there to sign for his defense portfolio. After all, he was still a general, right? Wrong. Before you could even warm his seat, Mnangagwa whipped out his magic wand and poof! Sanyatwe was no longer a general, but a minister of sports, recreation, arts and culture. One moment he's overseeing soldiers and commanding military strategy, and the next he's in charge of soccer balls and drum majorities. If that sounds illegal, that's because it is. If that sounds rushed, that's because it was. And if that sounds ridiculous, well, welcome to Zimbabwe, where the government reshuffles happen faster than you can say constitutional crisis. It was such an awkward transition that one can only imagine Sanyatwe looking around in disbelief, wondering if he had just been demoted to handling javelin throws and Bira festivals instead of military operations. Sanyatwe, who had been conveniently summoned to a secret meeting at Precab Farm, likely knew this was coming. If the public thought this was some last-minute spontaneous decision, they would be sorely mistaken. The script had already been written, the stage had already been set, and the actors had already rehearsed their lines. The government had already gone ahead and split the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Arts and Recreation into two, ensuring that there was a perfectly tailored post waiting for him whether or not Kirsty Coventry won the IOC presidency. In other words, even if Kirsty had failed to impress the international sports community, Sanyatwe's new job had already been secured like a VIP seat at a ZANU-PF rally. The lengths to which this regime will go to orchestrate their political chess games are simply unmatched. You almost have to admire the efficiency. If only they applied the same level of planning to fixing the economy, Zimbabwe might not be a poverty-stricken wreck. But despite the careful political maneuvering, Mnangagwa and his crew made one teeny tiny constitution-shattering mistake. They forgot to follow the law. For starters, a serving military general cannot hold a political position. Full stop. This isn't a matter of interpretation, debate or loophole finding. It's a clear-cut, ironclad rule written in plain English in Section 208, Paragraph 2 of Zimbabwe's Constitution. That section explicitly states that security service members must be non-partisan and cannot be involved in politics. And before you say, but he is a retired general now, no, he isn't. The correct procedure requires the president to officially retire a general, notify the relevant authorities, and ensure a proper handover-takeover process within the military. Which means this process requires you to give a notice to the general, and during that notice period, then the general can do a handover-takeover to the next general. None of that happened. Not a single step. What we got instead was a military commander magically turned into a politician in real time like a bad magician's trick performed at State House. It was so rushed and uncoordinated that even Mnangagwa's own officials seemed caught off guard. At this rate, it wouldn't be surprising if Mnangagwa started handing out ministries like raffle prizes. Congratulations, you are now the Minister of Roadblocks and Target Corruption. So as it stands, Sanyatwe is both a general and a minister at the same time, violating the constitution in ways that would make a dictator blush. But hey, this is Zimbabwe, where the law is optional and Mnangagwa's word is supreme. Who needs proper governance when you can just shuffle people around like chess pieces? One moment you are a military commander, the next you are in charge of the football tournaments and traditional dances. Maybe next week a traffic police officer will be appointed as the Minister of Finance. Why not? At this point, nothing surprises us anymore. The sheer arrogance of disregarding the constitution while pretending to respect it is a skill only ZANU-PF has mastered. And of course, the ruling elite know that Zimbabweans are too exhausted by daily survival to challenge these moves effectively. Of course, this whole circus wasn't just about giving Sanyatwe a cozy office with a new title. No, this was about survival. Mnangagwa's paranoia has been reaching new heights lately, and with the March 31 protests looming, his government is terrified. And it's terrified of one thing: a military that refuses to crack down on the people. Word on the street is that the army, tired of being Mnangagwa's personal attack dogs, was considering standing with the citizens this time. And who better to lead such a rebellion than a battle-hardened general like Sanyatwe? So what does Mnangagwa do? He yanks him out of the military and dumps him into a civilian ministry before he can even blink. It was like grabbing the referee in a football match and forcing him to play for one of the teams. The message was clear. You are no longer in charge of soldiers. You are now in charge of netball tournaments and museum renovations. But here's the kicker. Because Mnangagwa rushed the process and failed to legally retire him, Sanyatwe can still legally act as a general. So if he were to decide that Mnangagwa's regime needs a little military intervention on March 31st, there would be no legal grounds to stop him. That's right. In trying to neutralize Sanyatwe, Mnangagwa may have accidentally left the door open for him to lead a coup. You have to admire the irony. The very move meant to remove him from the military could legally justify him staying in it just long enough to make things very uncomfortable for Mnangagwa. It's almost poetic. In chess, this is called a blunder. In politics, this is called ZANU-PF logic. And what does this say about the state of Zimbabwe's government? If military generals can be swapped into ministries like players in a football match, then why pretend we have a civilian government at all? Why not just call it what it is? Military rule with extra steps? At this point, we are not even pretending anymore. The lines between the military and politics have been erased, redrawn, and erased again. Sanyatwe's appointment just makes it official. Zimbabwe is now being run like a military junta that occasionally holds elections for entertainment. Forget democracy. This is a dictatorship with dance breaks. So what's next? Will Mnangagwa appoint a ZANU-PF youth leader as the new army commander? Will soldiers be assigned to run the arts and crafts industry? Anything is possible in this land of lawlessness, where one man's paranoia dictates national policy. But one thing is certain: this appointment was a rushed, unconstitutional mess that exposes a regime desperately clinging to power. And if March 31 plays out the way people are expecting, Mnangagwa might have just made his biggest mistake. As we speak, there is no army commander in Zimbabwe. There is no commander of the Zimbabwe National Army. And because of that, there is no handover that has been done. And because there is no handover that has been done, Sanyatwe is still the commander of the Zimbabwe National Army. And because he's still a general, it is unconstitutional for him to hold a political position, because then that makes him politically aligned whilst he's still a serving general. If you're tired of watching Zimbabwe's constitution being shredded like old newspaper, subscribe to Zimwaves TV, because someone has to keep track of this madness.